For everyone who is here now, I have a question to ask you. It's 6 o'clock, the waning hours of one of the longest fast days of the year. And if you look around, you'll see there's a very nice crowd, and more people are coming in. So let me ask you, how is that possible that people at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening, it's not the afternoon anymore, it's the evening, I think, officially, come to listen to a shiur while you're concluding a 25-hour fast? I think I have an answer. The answer lies in something that happened last year, almost exactly a year ago. It was exactly a year ago, give about 3 hours. And last year we were finishing Tisha B'Av. And one of the great advantages you have is when you're a Rav of a shul, wonderful shul like this, is sometimes you get very special guests. Baruch Hashem, in our family we've had a number of those. So for break fast, Rabbi Miller, we were honored to have Rabbi Miller over. And I think it might have been for the first time Rabbi Miller was exposed to Avrohom were in Chavetz Chaim. And the seed boys from Chavetz Chaim were also at our break fast. And it was a wonderful experience. The boys, the Avrohom, I shouldn't say boys, really took to Rabbi Miller right away. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is not only it was a beautiful thing to see, but this year for breakfast, my wife arranged that the boys, the Avrohom should eat somewhere else. They should break fast by some other very important person in the community. And we received a protest, not because of the potential host. The potential host is a wonderful person. In fact, that host took the Avrohom for the beginning of the fast, and they enjoyed it thoroughly, if you can enjoy anything before Tisha B'Av. But it was because they wanted to be with Rabbi Miller again. They wanted to be with Rabbi Miller again. And I see a lot of people in the crowd are nodding or smiling, and I think that's the answer to my kasha. My answer to my kasha is because I think everybody here, whether you've heard Rabbi Miller in the past, heard a shiur from Rabbi Miller in the past, there's some Talmidos who had Rabbi Miller in Beis Yaakov or in other places, whether it is a long exposure through being in his classroom for months or hearing a shiur once, everyone has the same reaction, and that is they want to hear him again. And that's why, first of all, since last year, since he went to Mexico City, there's been a groundswell of people who requested that we bring Rabbi Miller all the way from Mexico City on Tisha B'Av. And that's also the teretz why we have such an incredible crowd here as we finish the times. And I could think of no better way, of course, and I'm sure everyone would agree, than obviously we need some way to grab hold, as I mentioned at the beginning yesterday. I mentioned in Yom Kippur that when we get to Ne'ilah, we're the last large community that's still in the Kedusha of Yom Kippur. And yesterday when we began the Tainus, I said we're the last major community that's starting the Zikaron of, to focus in on what Tisha B'Av all means. And so now I can tell you every major community is done, I think, and we're just holding on to Tisha B'Av. So I could think of no better way to really try to bring everything together than Baruch Hashem to present to the Kiyuv Rabbi Miller. And of course we'd like to thank him for, imagine the tremendous Skar Alicha, again coming from Mexico City. We greatly appreciate it. And so therefore, it's without further ado, it's really an honor once again.
Privilege to come here every year, and the truth is that someone's not often questioned how it makes us so happy to see each other. It's Tisha B'Av the right time to do it, but that's the venue we have. truth is that Los Angeles is the last, as far as I know, also one of the last communities to keep every Yom Tov and Tisha B'Av included. Mr. Hashem, it should be a Yom Tov of a different sort. and it's important for us to understand that that as difficult a day as Tisha B'Av is, physically and emotionally, there's tremendous benefit to us as individuals and as Klal Yisrael by observing the day properly. I've often mentioned that the Torah regulates our emotions, and the Torah tells us when to be happy, and the Torah tells us when to be sad. But the Torah never tells us to be depressed. Sadness is supposed to be a controlled emotion, so we need to be sad at times, but not to be depressed. And Tisha B'Av is a sad day. It's a day of introspection. It's a day of appreciating where we've come to, but at the same time not losing sight of where we're headed also. In the Kinnos, both at night and by day, we end off with psukim of nechama, of gula. This is something we do all the time. This is something that the way that the reading of the Torah is broken up. It always ends off with a davar Torah. It always ends off with something good. This is not due to any superstition. This is the way we're supposed to think. That the most difficult, trying circumstances are meant to end. Everything ends well. That's how that's our perspective on Golus. That Golus is a necessary step, a necessary part of history, and but it ends well. It's going to come to an end. One of the themes that recurs throughout the Kinnos, among several, is the level of suffering at the time of the Churban, the atrocities at the time of the Churban. And in a sense it's strange, in a sense, if we know of someone who's suffering now, a very, very important part of being Jewish is to empathize, to feel with someone else. You hear about someone else who's sick, who's in pain. It's important for us to feel that pain, to empathize with a person who's suffering. That's part of our own growth. It's part of the way we intensify our davening, our tefillos for a person. It's part of what unifies us. But that's all appropriate when it's someone who's suffering now. But to talk about how someone suffered so many years ago, why is it important how that person suffered? But of course, we have to remember it, be aware of it as part of our national consciousness. But why so much stress on suffering? Talk about the mistakes that people made at that time and how we need to correct that. That's certainly appropriate. We've mentioned in other years that that's really one of the main goals of learning Eichad, in reviewing the errors of that time. But what about the suffering? What about the pain? What about the atrocities that were committed at that time? What are we supposed to take out of it? I think there are two things. One of the things is we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate kindness. There's no greater chesed, no greater rachamim, no greater mercy than that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we're meant to reflect and say, how could it be? What's going on? Hashem, who is so kind and so loving and only wants the best for his people, that's what he did to them. He let that happen. That's what's supposed to do. In a sense, it's almost, you realize how bad things must have been for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have brought such intense suffering on Klal Yisrael. Imagine what it took. Imagine what had to happen. What provocation there must have been for that to happen. That's one aspect, I think. It's, in a sense, it's besides learning about the actual sins that were committed, we have to say, but how bad was it? How bad was the relationship? How low had Klal Yisrael fallen? Imagine that Hashem, who loves them more than anyone else could love them, brought that upon them. I think it's one aspect that it's one aspect, but I think there's another aspect also. Among all the different reasons to be upset about the Churban Beis HaMikdash, central has to be the Chil Hashem, the desecration of Hashem's name. We're supposed to, we've become too accustomed to a world of Golus, but there's an ideal world, and in the ideal world, here in this world, in the ideal world, the entire world looks up to Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael represents all the values and all the virtues and everything that's desirable in the development of a person. And Chazal say that during the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, whenever any of the Bnei Yerushalayim, any of the citizens of Yerushalayim would travel anywhere away, he would go on a trip, they'd bring a special chair for him to sit on. And they'd crowd around to hear his wisdom and to hear what he had to say. And that is the way the world is supposed to look. These are the people that follow the word of Hashem. These are the people that have access to divine wisdom. These are the people we want to be like. These are the people to emulate. These are the people to learn from. That's how the world's supposed to look. That's the normal world. We're not living in a normal world today. We're in an abnormal situation. And it's important that we remember that. The world is supposed to adore Klal Yisrael and look and say, wow, that's how we can have some access to Hashem through this people. We ourselves don't have that privilege, but through them we're going to learn. We're going to learn from them. We're going to absorb what they can give over to us. And of course, the fact that Klal Yisrael sinned was a terrible Chol Hashem. And the fact that Klal Yisrael suffered was a terrible Chol Hashem. And the fact that their enemies were able to perpetrate such injustice and to wreak such cruelty upon them brought out the fact that these people no longer are getting that special protection. They're not, they weakened their special relationship with Hashem. And that was all came to a tremendous Chil Hashem. It was a role reversal. All of a sudden, other nations with other belief systems were on top. And Klal Yisrael was underneath, was persecuted. It shouldn't be that way. And all this can help us. The awareness of how bad things had gotten, of the tremendous Chil Hashem that came out of it, can help us. Because sometimes in order to fix things, you have to hit bottom. And we have to realize that Klal Yisrael bottomed out at a certain point. Things got terrible. Things got to a point that it's just intolerable. We can't handle it anymore. We have to make it better. Rabbi Kotler Zechron Levracha points out that in contrast to the mitzvahs of the Torah, a person does the mitzvah the Torah commands us. It doesn't do it with so much feeling. It doesn't do it with so much emotion. It does it, follows the rules, fulfills the mitzvah, has intended to fulfill the mitzvah. He's done the mitzvah. It's not great, it's not ideal. We should certainly aspire to something a lot better than that. We should try to find out what the mitzvahs mean, and what we're supposed to learn from them, and how we're supposed to grow from them. But at least One fulfilled the mitzvah. It was done. He says, however, that when we talk about the customs of mourning, of Avelos, of the 3 weeks and the 9 days, and particularly of Tisha B'Av, these are customs instituted by Chazal, by our sages, and he says if you do it without feeling, you've completely missed the point. These are not divine mitzvahs. These were instituted expressly for the purpose of arousing certain emotions. And if you've managed to keep the letter of the law, and you measured your stool carefully, and you asked the Rav, well, what if it wasn't meat? What if it was cooked in a meat pot? And what if it was... Then you've missed the point. You've done all that, but you don't feel anything, you just missed it. Because they only want you to do these things so you could feel something. That's why... Yes, so we didn't go to the movies. We didn't hear any music. We didn't go to weddings. Okay, no weddings. Okay. So Chazal imposed these strictures upon us. Okay, so we can't do it. Yeah, buddy, but what? So what? Why? No, during this time we just don't do these things. They're not good enough. It's not good enough. You do Hashem's mitzvah that way, it's something. But it's not enough. So to keep all the rules and not feel anything, that's sad. That's missing. But if we do feel something, after a day of, I don't want you to be listening to inspiration a whole day, and I'm sure everyone feels something, and it's all over. So I'm inspired every time I come here and see people who are exhausted and who are starving and they're thirsty to listen. So I think everyone feels something. That feeling, says the Baron Kotler, is already the beginning of fixing the problem. Because the fact that Jews are upset and are pained by Chilul Hashem is already Kiddush Hashem. That's the first step. The fact that we care about it. So few people can say they care about things that happened so long ago. And they say, yes, we care about it. Chilul Hashem bothers us. We're upset about it. It consumes. We can't function normally because there's Chilul Hashem. That's the beginning. That's the first step to fixing things. I think it's general, something that we can all strengthen. I think that our sensitivity to Chilul Hashem has to be raised. I would not accuse anyone else, but I myself think that in the past, when different things happen that could be a Chilul Hashem, I think sometimes it's too smug and complacent. Well, at least it wasn't someone religious, or at least it wasn't one of us. At least it was a different. No, it doesn't matter. If the bottom line was that someone in the world, and maybe many people in the world, are going to say, that's Jews, that's Hashem's people, that has to pain us no end. And the fact that I wasn't the individual who did it, or the fact that it wasn't my peer group who did it, that's not a consolation at all. Not at all. And then sometimes it happens closer to home, and you say, well, it was far away, it wasn't here, It's not. We need to be concerned with the effect of every Chilul Hashem. And we need to strengthen ourselves. If someone else had a test and didn't pass that test, it's not for us to smirk and say, well, it didn't happen to me. Who knows? Chas v'shalom, if I were tested at my level, what would happen? And it all comes from a sense of mission. Who are we? Who are Klal Yisrael? What is our purpose in this world? We exist to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, to sanctify the name of Hashem. We exist so that everything we do makes people want to come closer to Hashem, to know more about Hashem. And this is both an individual and a communal and a national mission. And whenever anything goes wrong, it has to disturb. I mean, can you imagine if you run a business, and it's someone else, you're only one person, big company, big corporation, you're part of it, and you really want things to move well, and something goes wrong, there's a setback, and it wasn't someone else's fault. Oh, Baruch Hashem wasn't my fault, so it doesn't matter at all. No, you want the business to take off. It doesn't help you that it wasn't your fault. It doesn't help that it was someone else who did it. But you're not going to be turning a profit this month or this year, right? It bothers you a lot because it goes contrary to your purposes. So that's how we have to feel when there's a Chilul Hashem. And the whole Churban and all of Jewish history since the Churban has been one big Chilul Hashem. Because every time there was an inquisition, or a pogrom, or a destruction of Jewish community in Europe, every single one was a tremendous Chilul Hashem. Not the behavior of the Jews necessarily. No, let's say the fact that Jews suffered that way, and that people saw that's what happens to the chosen people, that was a Chilul Hashem. Oh, of course, there was tremendous, if these people were nifter al Kiddush Hashem. Okay, just the opposite. On the contrary, they behaved admirably. People gave their lives, went to their deaths, saying Shema Yisrael, saying Ani Mamin. That was Kiddush Hashem in the middle of an overall miserable Chilul Hashem. They did the best they could. But the fact that communities were uprooted and mistreated and were scorned by the nations that surround us, that was Chilul Hashem. And all of the suffering of Klal Yisrael is all fallout from the Churban. It's all continuation of. If the Churban, Beis HaMikdash, had not happened, all these Jewish tragedies would not have happened. So it's just the process that continued. But we're meant to take this. We as much as you can understand of Kines, hopefully every year you understand a little more, to the point we shouldn't need it anymore. But as you read about, we repeat Jewish suffering, and we repeat when our minds are full of Chilul Hashem. It was terrible, this happened. And it hurts us, and we need to be sensitive to what we can do to change that pattern, to reverse the pattern, to get back onto Kiddush Hashem. To remind ourselves of what our purpose is. To remind ourselves that we're here for Kiddush Hashem, and we can make Kiddush Hashem. And if we do our part, eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu will work on history, and let history turn to a Kiddush Hashem also. A number of years ago, we discussed the fact that Medrash says that there are 3 different Nevi'im, 3 different prophets use the expression Eicha. We've read them all in the last few days, right? First, Parshas Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Eicha es olavadi, how can I bear myself the burden of this nation? Shabbos Chazoin, Haftarah, we said, Yeshaya said, Eicha hisol lezoino, how unfaithful was the Jewish people. And on Tisha B'Av we tell us Eicha Yashva Badad. How does the populous city sit desolate? So a few years ago we mentioned that the author of Nasiras HaMishpat, in his introduction to Eicha, says that the word Eicha is an expression of wonder at an extreme. He says, the Medrash says a mashal. The Medrash says a mashal to these 3 Nevi'im, connects it, and it says that there was a woman who was married to a nobleman, and she had 3 servants. One saw her in her glory, one saw her in her moment of indiscretion, and one saw her in her disgrace. And each one commented, Each one said, wow. And so he says that we are a nation of extremes. When Klal Yisrael was a young, grown nation, Moshe Rabbeinu said, wow, how could such a thing be? It's amazing. I was amazed at the extreme, the potential this nation has. And Yeshaya Hanavi, who saw the sad state of affairs before the Churban, said, how could anyone sin this much? And Yirmiyahu, who saw the desolation and the destruction and despair, said, how could anyone undergo such suffering? And the point is that we're a nation of extremes. This year I saw something else. This year I saw that the first Tzion says that in every situation, the Navi made a point of bettering or repairing the relationship that Klal Yisrael has with Hashem. He says that he interprets Eicha as a rhetorical question. Could this be? No, it can't be. He said that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to endear Klal Yisrael to Hashem, and he said, no, too much for me. This is such a great nation. You need more than one person to help guide them. I can't do it myself. That was to bring out the greatness of the Jewish people. Yeshaya Hanavi said, this bad? Could this wonderful nation be so bad? Can't be. It has to be the result of an outside influence. This is not who they are. Can't be. Simply impossible. By nature of the severity of the Averis tells us this is not Klal Yisrael. No. That was the Eicha he said. And Yirmiyahu Hanavi said, to the point where they suffered so much, no. This can't go on like this. This is not the relationship we have with Christ, so it can't be. So each time was a, how could this be, with a no answer. So this is one of the things we have to learn from Tisha B'Av. We have to take a step back and take a hard look at ourselves and a hard look at Klal Yisrael and say, this is not where we're meant to be. This is not us. We've done silly things, but it's not who we are. We've been influenced by society around us. We've absorbed too readily some of their values, some of their goals. No, it's not us. It's not. We're a people of Kiddush Hashem. We're a people who cleaves to Hashem. We're a people who only wants to absorb Hashem's values and Hashem's messages. And that's who we are. And we're going to live by those principles, and we're going to show the world. And then, of course, that little nagging voice says, come on, you don't really think you're going to change the whole world, do you? And you don't really think you're going to even change Los Angeles, Jewish community. You think you're going to change? Come on. Who are you kidding? Let's just go with the flow, let's continue on. And I think it's important always to remember what how the Chafetz Chaim described his own life experience. He said that when he was a young man, he realized that he was gifted, that he had speaking abilities, and that he had writing abilities, and he realized that he had a mission. And he decided that he was going to change the world. And he tried, but he saw it's just too much to do. Couldn't reach everybody and couldn't. He decided that he would change the Jewish community of Poland. Because Poland was a strong Jewish community, and they would certainly be receptive to everything he wanted to teach them. And that became his revised goal, to change Yiddishkeit in Poland. He said he couldn't, it was too much for him. He said, this faction, another group, couldn't do it. So he said, okay, but Radin, right? I'm the Rav. Not, I shouldn't say he's not the Rav of Radin. He was the spiritual leader of Radin, though. In Radin, everyone knows that. In Radin, I'm going to change Radin. Couldn't change Radin. Radin, wasn't much bigger than this block. So he said, but in my home, that's my castle. I'm going to change my family. My family members are going to change. It's too much. And he said, so finally, I decided to settle for changing myself. That's what Chafetz Chaim said. And he was satisfied with that. I'll change myself, and that'll be my accomplishment. After the Chafetz Chaim passed away, someone told this over and pointed out what's really obvious, that of course in the end he changed the world. So by not focusing on changing the world, by focusing on changing the Olam HaKatan, on his own, changing his own world, eventually he did change the world. He did affect everyone. And all over the world there are people who are learning Shmiras Haloshen and wood trying. I must tell you, in Mexico City, there's a community of B'nai Noach. These are non-Jews who have no intention of becoming Eden. They want to live according to the Torah's rules for them. And they work on character, and they learn Shmiras Haloshen too. That's how far it reached. Just remember what Kiddush Hashem is. We have to, we're the leaders, we have to be leading in that example. And so this is the way we take whatever we learn today. We're going to say, I don't have to change everyone. I don't have to change the whole world. I don't have to change LA. I don't have to change everyone in the shul. I have to change. And that will be an accomplishment. And the effects will certainly be more than we anticipated. Because when you change, you provoke change, you affect change in others. You stimulate, you inspire change, even though you can't change anyone else. As the end of the period of Avelos draws near, we have to look at there's certain positive aspects of Golus also. It's important to know that Golus is a purposeful stage in the history of Klal Yisrael. It's not a waste. And one of the Kinos brings this out. It's very bittersweet. But it's, one of the Kinos talks about, and it's based on a medrash, that instead of fulfilling the Pesukim, the verses of blessing, of bracha, of Hashem, we've chosen, because of through our behavior, to fulfill the verses of foreboding, of suffering in the Teichah. And it's a medrash, it's based on a medrash on Eichel, that says that Hashem rebukes Klal Yisrael is if you had listened, you would be fulfilling this pasuk that starts with an aleph. Instead, you're doing this pasuk that starts with an aleph, and it goes through the aleph base, saying for every pasuk, for every letter, there's a pasuk of bracha, of blessing, and there's a pasuk that's just the opposite. And we're living out one scenario instead of the other. But one way or another, Hashem's will is going to get done. So we didn't take the easy road, so we're going to go to the hard road. But Golus is a purposefulness. It's now, given that mistakes were made, this is the way to go. And of course, Klal Yisrael has been tested in Golus, and by and large, Klal Yisrael has performed very admirably in Golus. It happened once during the Second World War. The Blushever Rebbe, Zechariah Levracha, was in a concentration camp. He was not the only Hasidic Rebbe there. There were other Rebbes there also. And as Hanukkah approached, they began to make preparations. You know, when Hasidim, the Rebbe lighting the Hanukkah menorah is an event. Everyone comes to watch how he lights the Hanukkah menorah. And so the preparations they made, it wasn't like Baruch Hashem, we can polish that menorah until it shines. What they did was they hollowed out a potato, so they would have something to put in. Then they saved their margarine rations. They could put in enough margarine, melted margarine, to light the menorah. And they plucked some threads from their threadbare uniforms to be able to make a wick. That was how they prepared for Hanukkah. And the Blushma Rebbe was honored with the lighting of the menorah. He approached the menorah, first night of Hanukkah. He said the first bracha. He said the second bracha. He hesitated, he stopped. And he turned around to look. And then he said the third bracha, the Shechianu, and he lit the menorah. And they asked him afterwards, what was the hesitation, what happened, changed? And he said, the truth was, I said the first bracha with no problem. Hashem commanded us to light the menorah, light Ner Hanukkah. And the second bracha, about how Hashem performed miracles for us, I had no problem with that. And then I had a hesitation, I had a doubt in my mind. There's some, in Bein HaMetzarim, we try not to say Shechianu. And I was questioning whether it's appropriate to say Shechianu given the situation we're living in. Can you say Shechianu on an existence in a concentration camp? Now, I knew I wasn't the only Rav or Rebbe here, so I wanted to see who else was there. I wanted to ask someone what to do. But when I turned around and I saw hundreds of people watching and waiting for Ner Hanukkah, that resolved my doubt that I knew you could say Shechianu. Because if that's how Klal Yisrael reacts, that in the middle of the suffering, they're all waiting for Ner Hanukkah, well, that's good enough for Shechianu for me. That shows the silver lining to the dark cloud in which we're living. And the Klal Yisrael throughout history has proven it. It was during the First World War that one of the great rabbis was traveling. I don't remember who it was, but he was traveling. He was in Hungary now, and he was staying in a certain shul for Shabbos. He had a room where he and his entourage stayed, where they had their sudas. Friday night, they heard a sound of soft singing coming from the Beis Medrash. The soft singing of someone learning Torah. And it went on. The Rabbi had a late Tisha, and this singing goes on, this sweet learning going on in the Beis Medrash late. So the Rabbi said something to see who it was. He came back, he was shocked. He said there's an Austrian soldier with his gun. And he's sitting there, this gun is propped on the table, and he's sitting and learning Gemara. I gotta find out who this is. Must be a soldier, well, it makes sense. So he went and he found out that this was a Jew who had been conscripted into the Austrian army. He couldn't, so he said he made up though that he has time off on the Friday nights, and on Shabbos, that's his deal. He's not going to waste it. He learns a whole night Friday night, so as not to waste a moment that he has off on Shabbos. So the Rebbe commented with, of course, a certain tongue-in-cheek. He said that, you see, these are the people who are keeping don't let Mashiach come. What was it people like this? Can you imagine what nachas Hashem has from a child who doesn't sleep when he has the chance to rest and sits and learns Friday night in spite of the environment? When Mashiach comes, where can Hashem get such nachas? Where can Hashem derive such pleasure from a Jew? He said, so of course Hashem keeps the Gola Shlep longer. He wants to have people like this. Of course, it wasn't his statement on this person. Of course, but that you have to understand the importance of what he was saying is that Golus is purposeful because it brings out some of the greatness of the Jewish people. You know how Daf Yomi has become such a popular thing? Daf Yomi, people who had little or no connection to learning join the movement. And Daf Yomi, it's a wonderful thing. Wherever you go, there's Daf Yomi. My wife's great uncles used to say a Daf Yomi shir. He said a Daf Yomi in the concentration camp, and he said it from memory because they didn't have a Gemara. But every evening, they would get together, and he would say a Daf. He would say a Daf. And of course, the most striking thing is you say, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good memory. That's pretty good Talmud Chacham. You know something? I don't know that we have the ability to emulate that kind of memory. But I say, look, I want to learn from the Yidden who came to that shir after a day of slave labor on starvation rations. I want to learn from them. I want to say that we can emulate. When things are tough, sometimes that brings out the best in us. So Golus has been a testing grounds for Klal Yisrael. Golus has brought out the best in us. Just like in Mitzrayim, where this week's parsha says that it was a kur habarzel, it was an iron crucible. A crucible is not where you destroy metal, a crucible is where you refine metal. And so Klal Yisrael was refined through that Golus, and Klal Yisrael is refined through every Golus. It brings out strengths that perhaps we ourselves didn't know we had. And so, in a sense, you could compare the Golus, the lengthy Golus. The Gemara in Shabbos describes the process by which they would extract the blood of the chilazon. The chilazon was a creature of some kind, it was a fish or a mollusk of some kind. But the chilazon was which they take the blood of the chilazon to make the dye that was used for what's called tchelis, a rich blue color dye that was used for the garments of the Kohen Gadol, and that was used in making of tzitzis when we had it. And the Gemara describes the process. The Gemara describes what when one squeezes the blood out of the chilazon, is one doing what's called the tilas neshama? You're deliberately killing something. It says no. There's a paradox here. The Gemara says on the one hand he has to get the blood out because that's the only way to make the dye. On the other hand, as soon as this creature dies, the quality of the blood goes down. And so the Gemara says, so he's trying to get the blood, but he doesn't really want it to die. He's trying to keep it alive, but take the blood out. So he doesn't have any benefit in this creature dying because it's better while it's alive. And I think that's where the situation of Golus that we have is that we have to do everything to get out of Golus, but while Golus is here, you have to take advantage of the unique situation that Golus offers. Because the tests we have to pass here, and now we're not going to have to pass after Mashiach comes. Part of the difficulty of Golus is what we call Hester Panim. Hester Panim literally is hiding the face. Hashem doesn't show his face to us. I once heard it described as Hashem is called Meitzitz min hacharakim. Hashem appears from through the cracks. Meaning that a father never stops loving his children, never stops caring for his children, never stops worrying about his children, and always, mothers for sure, and always being on top of things to try and make sure everything goes best for the children. So, when the children behave well, they get to go out and play, and parents open up the curtains, and they watch their children, and they look out, and they make sure they're on top of things, make sure nothing dangerous is going to happen. As much as they can, they protect their children. And of course, as the children walk by the window, they can wave too. They can wave back. That is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does with us when we behave well too. What happens when the children misbehave? Outside, and spend some time in the yard now. Play in the yard. You can't be here now. Play in the yard. Now they don't open the curtains. Now they just open a little bit because they want to make sure nothing bad happens. But they won't give their children the pleasure of seeing their smile. That's Esther part. Hashem says, I'm still watching you. I'm watching you in Golas also. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen. There's an expression in Spanish that says that Hashem squeezes, but he doesn't strangle. He'll take you as far as you can go, but not going to kill you, not going to destroy Klal Yisrael. He's going to push you pretty hard. But you just don't see it. And it's this seeing Hashem, or being aware of Hashem, that's very, very important for us. It's going to help us get through the final stages of Golas, get to the time of Mashiach. I heard a mashal, which it struck me, and I adapted it a little bit. Baby cries in the middle of the night. Baby's hungry. Does the baby clear his I'm hungry? No, he screams! And he screams hysterically. So mom gets up to go make a bottle. What is mommy's going to make a bottle. What is the baby? Baby screams hysterically. And she's in the kitchen, she's rushing in, and he's screaming the whole time. When does this change? As soon as she walks into the room with the bottle, and he sees her. But the hysterical screaming stopped. Now it's just, please give it to me. What was the difference? Why, again, he hasn't gotten the bottle yet. He's still hungry and thirsty. But at least he sees that his mother is coming. A minute before, she was also in the process of getting that bottle. But he didn't see it. Even though she told him, yeah, I'm going again, but didn't mean anything. So his desire has not decreased, but he's not panicking anymore. He realizes that help is on the way. So what we need to do is not be babies. What we need to do is say, I do know that as difficult as things are, Hashem is preparing the bottle. Hashem is in the process. To us it looks all bleak, but it's not all bleak. This is the way it has to be. This is getting us there. And we have to do our best now. Now, of course, we're not going to stop begging Hashem, but we're not going to be desperate. We're not going to be hysterical. We're not going to be broken. We're going to be at the stage of, please Hashem, please give it to us. We know it has to come from you. So this is the strength of Klal Yisrael. This is the strength. This is why people were able to walk the gas chambers saying, Ani Mami. They said, yes, I'm not going to make it. But my neshama lives on forever, and my nation lives on forever. And that, in the end, that was the main thing. question of remembering that when we talk about the darkness of Golus, there's light. The best part of Klal Yisrael came out. People helped each other in a way that they never helped each other before. And in moments of stress, since the destruction of Europe, you see how it happens when there's an illness in the community, how people are motivated, people help, and when someone has a problem, people are there to help. We just shouldn't wait for the problem. We should try and work on this. With Hashem, we know we can do without that. We're gonna aspire to these midas, to these character traits, these qualities, these virtues, even without suffering. We're not gonna wait for a Gulf War. Remember the Gulf War? Everyone, did you hear anything? Did you hear what doing? You didn't even check to see what color a person's yarmulke was, or whether he had one. It didn't matter. You just, and it's so sad that we need these things to unify us. We have to do it all the time. But to remember that Hashem is on top of things, that Hashem is moving things, and to remember that we have a connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, that we have that connection, that that Hashem is paying attention to what we do, and the Torah we learn is what connects us to Klal Yisrael, that connects us as Klal Yisrael to Hashem. You know that Chazal say in the pasuk Al Ma'od Haaretz, why was Eretz Yisrael destroyed? And it says that this question was asked to the Chachamim, to the wise elders of Klal Yisrael, and to the Nevi'im, to the prophets, and to the Malachim, to the angels, and no one was able to answer this. Until HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Al Azor Mesterasi, they abandoned my Torah. Very well known commentary of Rabbi Yoina, Ron the Durham quotes that if they stopped learning, why didn't everyone else know that answer? If people stopped learning, everyone could see that. There's no. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, Al Shalaberchu B'Torah Tchil. They didn't say Birkas, they didn't say the bracha on the Torah. And Rabbi Yoina says that Torah wasn't important enough to them to make a bracha. They did it, they learned, but they didn't see it was so important to say a bracha on it. So Baron Kotler points out that of course they learned Torah, but they didn't appreciate the importance of their Torah. And he said that's something we have to work on also. We need to remember that we have a connection to Hashem through our Torah. You're not just learning something very smart. You're talking to Hashem. You're learning from Hashem. You're bringing it from Hashem. This he says, he says, if you appreciate the importance of your learning, and this is not only men who are obligated to learn. Everyone says Birkas HaTorah. Even the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, told the women don't say brachas on mitzvahs, they don't do, but everyone says, he said they also say Birkas HaTorah because we all have a connection to Hashem through learning. And he says, so Baruch Kotler says, if we would appreciate that connection. Now we're not talking about diligence, that's something else. We're talking about just appreciating the importance of the Torah we learn. That, he says, is the first step in strengthening our relationship with Hashem, which will make us sensitive to Chilul Hashem. And that's the beginning of fixing the problem. And I think that we need to have this appreciation. Mishlei, it says that a person who turns his ear away from learning Torah, if a person turns his ear away from learning Torah, his davening is abominable to Hashem. And I say to myself, why? Because he doesn't do one mitzvah, he can't do another mitzvah. Okay, so a lot of you don't do all the mitzvahs. So why, if he doesn't do one, why is he excluded from another mitzvah? But if you appreciate what Torah is and what tefillah is, and you realize that it makes a lot of sense. You come to a new neighborhood, you have no friends, and someone comes and says, I'd like to be your friend. I see you're new here. We can be friends. I want to explain to you the terms of our friendship. I talk and you listen. You don't get to talk. And I'll listen. Thanks, but no thanks. That's not a healthy relationship. That's not a friendship. That can't be. It has to be two-way street. It has to be. So remember, davening is we talk to Hashem. We don't just read words that someone wrote. We actually talk to Hashem. And learning Torah is when Hashem talks to us. That's how Hashem communicates with us, through the Torah that we learn. So if you don't want to listen, you can't expect to talk. We can't have a relationship like that. You don't want to listen to words of Torah? Oh, so that's you can't be friends. Then you can't, of course you could do mitzvahs, but you can't expect to have a meaningful conversation if you're going to do the talk and not listen. Can't be. And it's important to appreciate that when we learn Torah, you're not just sitting there to learn something great. You're strengthening your connection, and you're listening to Hashem speak to you. It's not with thunder and lightning, and it's not with direct prophecy. But that's how Hashem talks to us. That's where He sends us the messages. And we need to know, as it says in the pasuk at the beginning of Eicha. It says Eicha Yoshua Badad Badad Ayir Abbas Yom Hoysach Kalman. It says Yerushalayim was like a widow. It says not completely like a widow. One of the opinions in the Medrash is that says, widowed from the 10 tribes that were exiled, and widowed from the last 2 tribes that were exiled, but never widowed from Hashem. The Shekhinah is always with us. Hashem's presence always accompanies us in the worst times. And that's when we're able, at the worst times, in the darkest goals, to say it's part of the process. The bottle is being prepared. And in the golos lie the seeds of redemption. In Slichas, there's a line that says, from the tzara, from the problem, you Hashem are going to fashion the redemption and the relief. And the Muzher Rav Zechariah Levracha said that when we talk about the darkest moment of golos, we say avodim honinu. Avodim, that describes the whole situation, avodim. But he says, but you know what avodim are slaves. But you know what avodim also does? The letters of the word avodim are the initial letters of David ben Yishai Avdecha Mashichecha. That in the slavery are the seeds of redemption. And that's the light in the darkness. Rabbi Hashem should help us that we should survive well the last stages of Golas, and we should merit the coming of Mashiach, and we should appreciate the light that's not light in the darkness, but light that's completely light. That's Hashem.
Speaking for everyone, to thank Rabbi Miller for bringing us from the darkness into the light. Meretz Hashem, His word should stay with us and help us, guide us. So Meretz Hashem, we are Zocha that Meretz Hashem next year, as I told all the speakers, we'll be back together, Meretz Hashem, with all of our wonderful speakers that we've had today. But the spin will be a little different, as we say in America. And it will be hopefully a Sasam Simcha Meretz Hashem for the ultimate Nacham, and Meretz Hashem will all be Zocha to share that together.